So we're going to start to your far right. Janice Baker is the City Manager and Chief Administrative Officer for the City of Mississauga. And Janice brings with her an extensive background in both private and public sector. She has 26 years of municipal government and financial administration experience, serving as Director of Finance and City Treasurer for the City of St. John's, Newfoundland, the Commissioner of Corporate Services, and then Commissioner of Public Works for the City of Oshawa. And she joined the City of Mississauga in May of 1999 as the Commissioner of Corporate Services and Treasurer, and was promoted to City Manager and CAO in 2005. I can stop there? Yeah. Okay. And there's more, so have a look at her bio. She's
cut mine short.
Very accomplished. Jean-Rene, at the center, Jean-Rene Halde joined BDC, the Business Development Bank of Canada, as President and CEO in 2005, and in 2010 was reappointed for another 5-year term. He's had more than 30 years of management and entrepreneurial experience before joining BDC, and he held CEO positions at leading companies like Metro Richelieu, Coulinar Inc., and the Livingston Group. And he also currently serves as the chairman of the Conference Board of Canada and is the director of the Montreal General Hospital Foundation. And there's more on Jean-Rene as well. And Jodi LeBlanc, who is to your far left, is the Values and Ethics Advisor with Veterans Affairs Canada and Prince Edward Island. Her professional leadership activities include active involvement as past chair of the Federal Youth Network and IPAC National New Professionals Committee. In addition, she is actively involved in her local Chamber of Commerce and within her community, and she is a member of the Canadian Government Executive Advisory Board and manages the New Professionals monthly editorial column. And there's also a lot more about her. Strong supporter of Web 2.0 technologies, and on and on. So we've got a very diverse group of panelists to explore the questions we want to around leadership, and really hopefully leave you with a call to action at a personal level. So let's dive in. So the first question is, what do you see as the key leadership challenges for public service leaders today, and how should we respond? We heard a lot about that today, but the question of how should we respond is one that's important. So Janice, do you want to start with that?
Sure. I mean, for us, municipal governments deliver services really at the front doorstep of citizens. And I guess, I could go on with a long list of challenges, but I'll probably break them down into 2 different categories, both of them really in the area of resources. So first of all, staff, talent. You've heard a little bit about that today, and I was particularly impressed with Daniel's presentation and what they're doing in the federal public service. But we are starting to see some of those talent shortages. And I mean, we're a very diverse organization. We look for professional talent in many different areas. So certainly, what are we doing about it? Looking at growing our own. We've put in a very robust succession planning framework program, really looking at high potentials in our organization. And I'm pleased to say having some success in terms of really looking at our organization through the lens of talent management and succession planning, as opposed to, we have a vacancy, now what do we do? So really trying to anticipate where those hot spots are in the organization. But I think the second one for me, unfortunately, the public's being fed a daily diet of all the public sector has to do is tighten its belt and clean up its act, and everything will be just fine. And you can get more, better, faster. Citizens can demand and get what they need if we would only just do our jobs a little more smartly. That one's a little more challenging, but I think I find that frustrating. And you talk about leadership. I think when you see role models like, and I'll name the name you didn't mention, but Mayor Ford in Toronto, and you live right next door, those become really challenging messages to counter. But I think what we have to do then as an organization is really be able to demonstrate, measure, and show through benchmarking, through measurement, and through really strong public communication how we are doing as an organization, and hopefully demonstrate that the value that taxpayers are getting for their dollars is there.
Okay, great. Jean-Rene, your perspective?
Well, there's a number of challenges, as we know. One of them is clearly the pace of change is accelerating, whether we're looking at technology or globalization or demographics and so on. And I think as a leader, the necessity to stay connected and fully, I wouldn't say understand the changes, but feel the changes. Because to me, what you want is to make sure that whatever you do, you got this feeling as to how this thing is moving. And so you actually kind of feel how whatever you do fits into a bigger picture. The second challenge, I think, is separating activity from impact. It is so easy to manage activity. And you can feel good about, geez, I've moved a pile of paper from the left side to the right side, and I feel good about that. But if you've had no impact, it's a waste. And so focusing everything you do on what's the ultimate impact of what I'm doing, and good activities without impact is useless. And I guess the third one, and that would be my last one, is we all know that, particularly in a lot of the environments we all work in, a lot of the decision making is a bit outside of your bailiwick, and decisions get made, by others. And that's at times a bit depressing. And what you want to do, though, is stay absolutely focused on the long term, stay absolutely focused on what you want to achieve in terms of impact, and just keep pushing. And to the point that Vince was making is figure out what is within your bailiwick to make happen. Too many, I think, leaders get overly depressed by, oh, well, I tried this, didn't work. Well, too bad. Keep trying. The objective is still the right one, and the impact you need to have is still the impact you need to have. So keep pushing. When the going gets tough, the tough get going, and I think that's our role as leaders.
Great, thanks. And Jodi, your perspective.
And as Louise Livonia mentioned this morning, change is the new normal, and we're always going to have challenges. So change takes a lot of effort, and it's about really getting comfortable with the uncomfortable. But the first one for me would be managing competing priorities. We're so set in our day and focused on what's happening in the moment that sometimes we don't look back at maybe mistakes we made or things we would have done better, and looking towards the future, really taking times in our day to forecast ahead as opposed to just living in that moment. The second one for me would be really looking after ourselves and our employees, especially in challenging times. I don't know if you've seen the recent APEC study on the health of our leaders. It really worries me to see that study. And I use the analogy that my former deputy said, that when you're on an airplane in times of crisis, the oxygen masks drop down, and you always put the oxygen mask on yourself before helping others, because if you're without oxygen, you're useless to your employees. So you really have to take the time to look after yourselves before you can look after others. And the third one for me would be maintaining strong engagement levels. Right now, we're really in an engaged workforce where people are very excited about Blueprint 2020. After the initiative and the action plan is out, it's up to us as leaders to really look at what engages our employees and to keep that momentum growing during challenging times.
Okay, thanks. So let's go to the second question. One challenge as I've positioned and we've discussed today is the need to drive real leadership accountability. And what's your perspective on this, and how do you drive it in your own organization? So Jean-Rene, I'll start with you.
Clearly, you want to make sure all of your people are accountable, and I think it's all about aligning the performance objectives. In our case, as a Crown Corporation, it starts with our corporate plan, down to my own objectives vis-a-vis the board, to my executive VP's objectives, to me, down all the way to the account managers. And they have got to be aligned. And they have got to be focused on impact. And if you've got misalignment in the objectives, then you've got obviously, a mixed message. Now, I have to tell you, I suspect a Crown Corporation like BDC probably has it a bit easier than probably a lot of departments. because, we've got the carrot, we've got the variable pay at a pretty decent percentage, we've got the stick. If things don't work out, we'll thank you for your help. So the tools are there. But having said that, you've got to use the tools well, whether it's the quarterly reviews, whether it's the performance reviews. It's got to be done. And I think to the point you were making, you've got to be honest with your people on performance. There's nothing worse than not telling an employee whether he or she is doing either a great job or a poor job. I think it's our role as leaders to tell it like it is. There are unpleasant conversations at times to be had, but you've got to have them. Because if you don't, you're not doing yourself a favor, but worse, you're not doing that person a favor. And I think that's the responsibility we have. We'll stop
Janice.
there.
I think building on what Jean-Rene said, clearly in our performance management system, we built a series of leadership competencies within that system, and we went beyond just the words, you're accountable for results, you need business acumen, to really describing the behaviors that you would see if somebody was performing in that area at a high level. But I think for me, the one accountability that I've really made a cornerstone of my leadership at the City of Mississauga is really the accountability for people. I really do subscribe to the boss hole theory of, 50% of an employee's attitude about their work or more is directly related to their relationship with their direct supervisors. And in an organization like ours, we've got probably 500 or so leaders at different levels, from frontline supervisor right on up to my level. Every single one of those individuals is accountable for driving performance and engagement with the people that they're responsible for. So it's one thing to describe what you want from people. I think for me, it's really been about providing support to the leaders in our organization so that they can perform at their best. So we do 360 evaluations. I have an annual leadership conference within the city where we bring those folks together. They can network with each other. They can learn, and they can learn within the context of our organization. We bring in speakers, but we also bring people within our organization that we know are practicing leadership at a very high level, and use them as both examples, but to conduct some of the sessions. So I think around the whole notion of accountability, it's having an accountability framework, but you have to really give people the tools to be able to perform well and to understand what's expected of them.
If I can just add something, and I'm sorry, Jodi. What you choose to measure is very important, because people will react to what you measure. And so in our case, if we measure the number of loans that our account managers make, we'll get the number of loans we want. But if we try to measure impact on the client, meaning did you really help that client, that's much more rich in terms of what we do. And it changes the way they look at their job. And so the choice of the measurement unit, to me, is very key. Sorry.
Yeah, and it ties back the point you made regarding the activity versus the impact. Yeah. Well, let's move on. The next question, there's a theme coming out of today, also the theme with respect to leadership for the future in the public service. So what leadership behaviors are emerging now as being most critical for public service leaders, and why? So Jodi, what are your thoughts on that?
So I've been very lucky. I've had really amazing leaders, and leaders that I admire, leaders that I learn from every day. And some of the behaviors that they've demonstrated is what you see is what you get. They're very transparent. They wear their values on their sleeve. There's no surprises. They set out all the expectations so their employees know where they stand. And they deliver results. They establish a really strong track record of getting things done, and they always do what they say they're going to do. There's no false promises. And they demonstrate respect, and they model the behaviors that they seek from us as employees. And they act with engagement, commitment, and responsibility every day. I've never seen them off their leadership game. They're always living their behaviors. And developing relationships and taking a genuine interest in their employees, that makes such a difference. No matter how busy it is, when I come in the morning, my manager always asks how my evening was or my weekend. No matter how busy it is, she always takes time for me as an employee. And really give constructive criticism where it's needed and recognition where it's deserved. That's something that's really important, and I know, Jean-Rene, you touched on that. And employees are our #1 asset. We can't forget that. We need to always remember that in every decision we make as leaders.
That's great. The value of having you on the panel is, bringing the generational perspective. And what's fascinating is, I've had chats with my team members who are millennials, and it's remarkable how similar your answers are. Really, the understanding, the expectation that Gen Y have around transparency and authenticity is actually very stark. And I think the other thing that you share that's helpful is their expectation of wanting to work with great leaders. And their difference is they come in with that expectation, and if they don't work with great leaders, they leave. It's really simple. Boomers stayed, Gen Y leaves. And so that puts pressure on all of us to step up our game. So thanks for that. Jean-Rene, you're anything to add on that in terms of what you see from your vantage point as the key leadership behaviors?
Yeah, I guess, I got my first CEO's job back in 1979. So I've been at this game now for 30 some odd years as CEO. And I have to say my views of this have changed. I have to tell you, back in the 80s, I saw people as an input to production. And it was just part of the things you moved around, like on a chess board. And as I get, to be a bit older, it's amazing how I now realize to what extent all the soft stuff is really the key stuff, including truly believing that you'll only be successful if you make your people successful. I mean, 30 years ago, I would have said, I wouldn't have said it, but I would have thought something like, you're here to help me be successful. And now it's all about, I'm here to make you successful. And I know that the end result of that will be that the organization will be better. But I have to tell you, that took 10, 15 years to actually kind of sink in. But it does make a difference. And the other couple of comments on leadership behavior, I would say, obviously be comfortable with change management, because we're going to see lots of that. And I would say just be resilient. I mean, resilience to me is a wonderful quality. Don't know if it's a behavior, but it's certainly a quality that I would say is key in leaders today in this difficult environment, and the ability to tolerate ambiguity. We're all in tough roles, and you got to be able to tolerate ambiguity and not lose sleep over ambiguity. I mean, it's just that. And finally, have the courage to be bold. And every so often, you're not popular, but your job is not to be popular; it's to do what's right, and bold when it's needed. I'll stop there.
Thank you. Janice, anything to add?
Just quickly, I think one of the things that the public will expect of all of us going forward, have expected for a long time, the whole notion of integrity and speaking truth to power. I get to do that on TV every Wednesday morning with my council, and it's not always fun, but I can see the impact it has on both my staff and on the public when politicians are playing political games, and then I get to interject and I'm going to say bring some logic to the discussion. The notion that as senior public servants we're sort of sitting in the background and supporting, and the politicians are out front, I guess is still alive and true, less so in the municipal sector. But I think in the future, the public and even the elected officials with very high integrity will be expecting us to step forward and talk about what's right. The ethical standards that we need to apply to the work that we do, and more of us, I think, in the future are going to be required to do that, to offset what I see as some of the challenges that we have right now around credibility and decision making in the public sector.
Okay, thank you. So, a lot talked about today in terms of the future of the public service. So I'm curious as whether the three of you think, are these the best of times, or are they the worst of times to be a public service leader? So, Jean-Rene, where you want to start us off?
Well, my problem is I really can't speak for the public sector in general. I can only speak to the BDC. If I speak to the BDC, it is a good time. I have to tell you, I think being at arm's length from government is probably an advantage because we've got our own board, and so we can do, can do within reason what's right. And so to be at BDC today, given our mandate of helping entrepreneurs, I think it's a great time. I have to say that I have conversations with other folks in other areas. They seem to struggle a lot more than we do. So I guess that speaks to the advantages of Crown corporations. I'm not going to go any further than that.
Okay.
They're definitely interesting times. I have to say there are days when I struggle a bit to be optimistic. I'm not sure we've articulated a strong vision for our country, and I'm thinking about an economic vision, infrastructure investment, all of the things that we used to do as a country. I mean, the vision to build the Trans-Canada Highway, the vision to build the bridges across to the United States, the vision to build the St. Lawrence Seaway. Where the heck are those people these days? I just don't see them in the public sector, and I worry about that. Because what we do today are really the cornerstones for the next 20, 50, and 100 years. So from where I sit, I think there's too much short-term decision-making that's happening and not enough, looking out to the long term and to the future. So I probably won't be around long enough to see if I'm right.
Fair enough. And Jodi, your perspective, best of times, worst of times?
Well, to me, I'm still early in my career, but I do think it is the best of times to be a leader in the public service. I know it's not going to be easy from day to day, but leaders right now can really impact change with initiatives like Blueprint 2020 and make a difference for their employees and for the public service and for Canadians. So it's a really instrumental time right now where we can influence change, and it's a pivotal moment where every decision we make every day, it's going to impact the future. And we'll be able to live this vision of 2020 and beyond. So each day is challenging, but I do think this is a really great time to be a leader in the public service.
Yeah, and it's a question that I encourage each of you to ask yourselves because it gets back down to leadership as a decision. Given everything you've heard, given Blueprint 2020, what do are you all in? Do you believe it's the best of times or the worst of times? And your answer to that question dictates how you show up every single day. So certainly think about that. So we got one last question, and then we're going to turn it over to you for some questions. And it really is about this kind of the call to action and what advice would you have for the leaders in this room to help them lead more effectively, not only today but in the future. So Janice, your thoughts on that?
Well, the best piece of advice that I got when I became the city manager for the city of Mississauga came from my director of communications. And she said, Janice, you cast a long shadow. And it really is about showing up in your organization. And I know it's a cliche, but it's probably a good cliche around walking the talk and really behaving in a way that becomes a role model for your organization. And I think the advice that I would give all public sector leadership is be aware of the shadow you cast, and that people do look to you to set an example and to set the tone and to lead the way. And so you need to be aware of that. And if you're aware of that and you act accordingly, then I think you'll be successful.
Jean-Rene?
I'd say stay focused on the reasons why you exist. Kind of, in our case, it's the client. In your case, might be something else. But what's the mandate? What's the reason for being? And that, to me, should be kind of always the stuff you think about to decide how you're going to behave. Stay focused on the long-term objective. As I said earlier, deal with ambiguity. And I would say, from a very personal standpoint, stay independent in your mind. Stay free. And what that means to me is have the feeling that you're good enough that you can walk out anytime. You got to be so self-confident that you know what, on any day, you can just decide to walk out, and you feel good about that. And then, because if you stay, it's because you choose to stay. It's because you believe that what you do is important. You stay because, you know, the leadership you're exercising is important, and you don't stay because you're stuck. And the worst leaders, to me, are the leaders that don't truly kind of internalize the reason why they're there and what they're doing and how important it is and so on. So I'd say mentally, you got to be prepared to just walk out. As a matter of principle on some issues, just because you can't take it anymore, and if you choose to stay, it's because you want to stay. So I'd leave it at that.
Thanks. And Jodi?
And to me, leadership really comes down to communication, trust, respect, and continuous improvement and understanding. You want to be the leader that others choose to follow and really make your employees feel important and appreciated. And provide that right amount of guidance to your employees. There's no one-size-fits-all. You really have to get to know them and see what type of leadership, almost like a chameleon approach, that you would treat each employee differently based on their needs. And question why things are done a certain way. My manager does this to me every day or every week. Why are we doing things this way? And there may be another efficient way to do it. So really always challenge the status quo. And don't be afraid to roll up your sleeves and work alongside your team when they need you. It's appreciated so much. Your employees, they're going to return the favor by being highly effective, loyal, and very happy employees. And to me, that's the true reflection that you are a strong leader and you've mastered successful leadership when your employees return the favor and they're engaged every day and will give their heart and soul into the organization.
Great. Thank you, Jodi. Okay, over to you. So here's your last task of the day. So at your tabletops, just take a couple of minutes to reflect on the ideas from the panel and identify a key question that you'd like to direct to either an individual member of the panel or to the panel in general. And then we will spend a few minutes on that, and then we will wrap up. So I'll ask my colleagues, Nancy and Margot, if you don't mind. We'll try to get as many questions as we can, so maybe if we can have roving mics, and you can play Phil Donahue. Some of you people know what that reference is in the room. Others have no clue what I'm talking about. So take a few minutes first at your tables to talk about reflections, insight, and some questions, and then we'll quickly go around and try to get as many as we can in the remaining time that we have. Okay, so a couple of minutes at your tabletops. No, I decided I was going to do my presentation. I decided not to do it. Yeah. Yeah, I told them already.
Oh.
Thank you. What's that?
Thank you.
A little bit.
It was
A little bit.
in my
okay.
notes,
I'm sure it's fine.
and my people, when they read my notes, God knows who's in the audience.
You will.
We're going to get
You will. Just practice. You're fine.
the bank in trouble, so stay away from that one. But thank you.
Thanks.
Well, that was my contribution.
I wanted to
I guess.
connect you guys for a
You know,
while.
Yeah,
I don't know if you
I
knew.
was-
If you knew, do you know?
No, we didn't know each other.
No.
But I was saying what she said on vision,
On vision. Yeah.
I thought, oh boy.
So Jodi, I've had the
I felt like
pleasure
getting up
to
and
work with
applauding.
both. They're two of the best leaders
Maybe we'll get a question.
I've ever.
To be on the panel with you three.
Oh,
What's that?
I'm honored to be on
No,
this
no, it's
panel
great.
with the three
You're
of
doing
you.
great.
yeah, you
Yeah.
did.
Doing fine.
You know, you brought a
doing fine.
really great perspective. Your answers
Yeah.
were terrific.
Yeah.
Yeah, you did a great job.
The
Yeah.
only thing that hurts is when he says, we have generational perspectives here. So, and I know which side you're on, so I know which side I'm on.
Well,
Yes.
hey, it's becoming more and more apparent every day for me. That's
No
why
kidding.
I do. questions?
Okay.
You ready? Okay, let's start. Just raise your hand, and my colleagues Nancy Oak here and Margot Hoyt from our Ottawa office will help you. So we have Nancy, a question already? Great.
J'ai une question pour Monsieur Halde. You've talked about the importance of measuring the impact of your actions. Mm-hmm. Well, we are aware about that, but we're confronted with the difficulty to measure the impact, and also the resources needed to measure the impact. Because often you have to do a survey to measure the impact, and we know that surveys are very expensive to conduct. And also, there's also that part of that you cannot control when you do trying to measure the impact of your actions. So, do you have insights on how to do that?
There's no doubt that measuring impact is awfully difficult, and establishing the cause and effect relationship is very difficult because, for example, we can show statistically, because we had Statistics Canada take 14,000 of our clients and measure that against the overall population of SMEs in the country, and we can show that people that get both consulting and financing do better, on average, than the control group of every SME. We can show that. But we can't show cause and effect, because maybe the ones that are smart enough to get consulting are so different anyway that they would have done better regardless of the consulting. So, you know, so the very large surveys like those are hopefully indicative of something positive, but you can't attribute all the positive news to what we do. It's easier when we do a mandate. So we do a consulting mandate. The margin of profit for the company is 32%. By the time we leave for the following 2 years, it's 38%. You know, you can probably say most of that increase was probably due to the work we've done, or at least some of it. So it all depends. The larger the surveys, the more difficult it is to, it's statistically right, but it's not necessarily cause and effect. So it's tough. There's no easy answer to that one. But I think it's a mix of all of those that you got to do, and surveys are expensive. And even StatScan is expensive when you hire them. But I think it's the way to get good data.
Okay. Who's next? Okay, in the back there, Margot.
A question on whether leaders are born or made. And I'll just relate an anecdote. My first boss, my best boss, was a research scientist. And so I grew up in an R&D organization at the beginning of my career, and I've often heard these days people commenting that, a scientist or a really good engineer, or really good person that has credibility in their field can't possibly be a good leader. And I just would like the recommendations of the panel as whether you can actually be identified as somebody that has credibility in their domain, and whether you can take that person and help make them a great leader.
Tackle that one.
I'll go after.
I would say not in every case. I mean, I think, you know, my experience in dealing with people is you have to have a comfort level in being out front and taking some of those leadership risks. You have to be, I think most leaders are good communicators. And so I think there are some people who, they could be very great technical experts, but if they don't have some of those inherent talents that you need to be a leader, I think it's very difficult to grow from, you know, if it's a barren field, you can plant all the seeds you want, they're not going to germinate. But I think that everybody who has got some natural leadership ability can grow that, can get better at it. The best leaders to me, though, the people who really rise to the challenge are people who are very self-aware. They take feedback well, they look at themselves critically, they want to understand their impact on others and you know, how people perceive them and how they can be better leaders. And if you've got that, and if you're strong in that self-awareness area, then I think you've got the ability to go from being a good leader to being a great leader, just by virtue of the fact that you're open to that kind of feedback and input.
Great. Jean-Rene, you wanted to add, or?
No, I think the whole issue of self-awareness, if you don't know your blind spots, boy, are you in trouble. And so self-awareness, that's why the 360s to me are so important as development tools, and being very honest about what you learn in a 360, not for performance measurement, but for development purposes. Self-awareness, and to your question, to me there are two different circles. There's the circle of your scientist, technical guy, and then there's the circle of leadership abilities, and you hope those two circles have at least something in common, and they're not two separate things. But I agree with you. Someone that's got the smarts and the self-awareness, hopefully you can build on that to go somewhere.
Okay, Nancy, there's another question over here.
Thanks. Our question is, how does leadership change when things go wrong? So in other words, when scandals hit or results aren't achieved or something along those lines.
Who wants to tackle that one?
I can take a stab at it, having been in that spot a couple of times. I think you need to be calmer than everyone else. To me, the measure of a good leader is when the shit hits the fan, you are so cool because everyone is looking up to the way you're behaving. And if you even give a hint that you're panicking, which you might be doing on the way home, but as long as you're in the office, I think you've got to look as if you've got that in hand. You know, I think you've got to be open that you're still maybe searching for solutions, but you got to inspire a sense of confidence more than, I'd say, when things are going well. I mean, that's when, to me, the true test of leadership is not when it's smooth sailing. The true test of leadership is when you've got the big waves. But I think at that point, people, boy, that leadership is 10 times more important. And you got to just stay the course, be calm, and just, we'll write it out. We'll write it out. Just the same way the pilot will tell you it's going to be bumpy, but, you know, we'll keep going.
Okay.
You really have to admit your mistakes and apologize and strive to do better and really be compassionate to your employees and communicate with them and move on from there.
Yeah, she's right. If any of the problem is due to you, then I think you're absolutely right. You own up to it. I think the one thing that is key to me as a leader is trust. And you've got to inspire trust. And, you know, I hold a quarterly call with all the employees, 2,000 employees on the call. Okay, and we review where we stand every quarter, including some of the bad news we've got to share. And in some cases, I've actually apologized to the employees because I had said something and didn't turn out to be that way, and I apologize. But I think people, after a certain period of time, figure out that, boy, that guy's trying to do what's right. He's being honest. He's being open. And honestly, they'll forgive you for stuff. If you try to BS your way through, boy, that's the worst thing to do.
Okay, we've got one more question here.
Good afternoon, panel. My name is Jack Dow. I'm a financial analyst with Public Works. My question specifically addresses Vince's presentation part, but I'd like to open that to the panel as well. So, Vince, I think we can all agree that following your presentation, you have been very fortunate to be blessed with such a great mentor. I was very impressed with your anecdote and, you know, the recounting of that story where your mentor, you know, facing her own mortality, found the kindness and, you know, the generosity in her last moments on this planet to share with you some wisdom. I just think it takes a great amount of kindness and of virtue to be able to do this. Because as you said, we don't choose to be leaders because it's easy. We choose to be leaders because it is hard. Because it's easy to be cynical, and it's easy to say, look, I work in a beige room with beige desks and beige people. I'm just going to go cynical, close my eyes, go to bed, hope all this goes away. It's somebody else's problem. I'd like to know from your standpoint, because I really wish I could have asked, Zanta, was that her name? Zanta. I wish I could have asked Zanta myself. But I'd like to know, through you, what was a great virtue as a leader that she possessed? I'm sure she had one, because otherwise you wouldn't be sharing her story with us today. And for those of you from the panel, I'd like to know, what was a great leadership virtue that you found throughout your career that really impressed you?
Yeah, I would say in her case, her strength was her humility. She was always behind the scenes. So a good example is, she led that team. But when we had any opportunity to present to senior management, she could have just done it on her own, and she never did. She just gave opportunities for others to lead. And that's something, that's what I've learned is often, that virtue that I admire in great leaders is that it's not all about them, that they have the self-confidence and that they know that they're always just building other leaders. That's how they're wired. So that would be how I'd comment in her case. Others? The virtue that...
To me, it's about the leader being herself or himself. And you are who you are, and you don't pretend to be something else. And so, you got to be open, you got to be vulnerable, you got to be prepared to be vulnerable, to show that, you're not handling this well. You can show that, you're having a tough time with this. People will connect with you as a person first. And after that, obviously, you've got to be forthright, blah, blah, blah. But I mean, it starts with, I think, connecting with the person and not connecting just with, the face in front and the appearance of, oh, this is the leader. To me, it's about connecting people to people.
And I think to build on that, it's really about, for me, the best relationships that I've had with leaders have been with people who are present when you're involved, involved in a discussion or a conversation or problem solving or whatever. Just be present, while we've got that time together to do whatever it is we need to do, focus on having a good, honest, authentic conversation. And I think, you build relationships that way with leaders that oftentimes are long-term relationships that really stand the test of time.
So it's about the person as much as it is about the office.
I think the relationship side is more about the person. The best moments that I've ever had as a leader have been moments when have been those personal moments. Because I've got the weight of my office, I can throw that around anytime I want. But to really engage with people in your organization, to bring out the best in people, to see them succeed, and then to see that cascade down into the organization so that they're drawing out the best of the people that work for them, that's the stuff that's the only reason I get up in the morning, because all the political shit, I'd go home and go to bed. But it's that people relationship, that administrative side of the organization, that's what drives me to really engage with the organization.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I really appreciate your frankness.
Jodi, do you want to say
Okay,
anything?
so thank
I
you.
think Jodi wanted to add something.
Jodi, do you want to jump in? Sorry.
Also, just as you mentioned, the support and the appreciation and giving the really sound feedback, whether it be constructive criticism or recognition for a job well done, and taking the time to mentor you and always want the best for you. That, to me, is a very strong virtue of a leader.
Thank you, Jodi.
Great. So join me in welcoming Janice, Jean-Rene, and Jodi for their time today and sharing their insights on the future of leadership in the public service. So thank you.
Thank you, Vince.
And over to you, Paul, to close off the day.
Thank you. I've got 5 thank yous and 3 asks. The thank you, Vince, Jodi, Janice, Jean-Rene, for an excellent session. Thank you to all of our speakers. Thank you to the behind-the-scenes organizers. Thank you to our sponsors, IBM, Lexmark, Adobe, PMI, IMEX, Interest BDO, Knightsbridge, Cogniva, and Morneau Chappelle. And thank you all for coming, joining with us, participating, and for the great public service that you provide day to day. The asks, please complete the feedback form. It's important to us. Please stay and enjoy the reception and networking if you're able to. There was a free drink coupon in your package. If you've misplaced that, come and see me. I've got some more. And finally, please join us next year. Thank you.